and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I am going to dive deep into the meaning of Saturn in Aries and also what it means when you undergo a Saturn return in Aries. I recently wrote an ebook about Saturn and its impact on our life path, and if you really want to explore Saturn in much more detail, go check out this ebook on my website. So Saturn is the planet that is the teacher of the zodiac. Essentially, whatever sign Saturn is in, we struggle to really access those traits. We struggle to embody whatever that sign represents. We essentially have to learn a lot of discipline, responsibility, order, structure, and maturity in our lives before we actually can embody and access the traits that are represented by our Saturn sign. It essentially shows us where we face a lot of obstacles and where we really have to apply a lot more effort to proceed and succeed in life. So Saturn governs the concept of time, both in the sense of the chronological age as well as the metaphorical seasons of life. It teaches us the value of patience, planning, and long-term thinking. The lessons Saturn offers tend to be very hard-learned. They usually lead to a much deeper understanding of life, a deep understanding of oneself, and the development of wisdom and maturity. When Saturn's energy is expressed positively, it leads to growth, mastery, accomplishment, and success. So Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. Aries is a fire sign that is ruled by Mars, and it is also known as a cardinal sign. Aries is a sign that represents personal confidence. It represents leadership and the ability to initiate something and really go after your dreams and ambitions. However, on the dark side, Aries is also a very impulsive sign. There's a side to Aries that's a little bit selfish and self-centered and overly focused on their own needs. Even this dark side has its positives because these people are so self-focused. They know exactly what they want and they know exactly how to go after it and manifest what they want in life. So yes, even being a little bit selfish and self-centered has its positives because these people know what they want. However, because we're talking about Saturn in this equation, when you have Saturn in Aries, these qualities are all diminished. This means that a person of Saturn in Aries really struggles to be competitive. They really struggle to put themselves out there, to be assertive, to step into a leadership role. And these are things they actually shy away from. However, once they undergo their first Saturn return, they will learn these traits and qualities and why it's important to have them, and their life hopefully will go in a different direction. So Aries represents courage. It represents initiative. But the thing is, Saturn restricts this. So on the positive side, Saturn and Aries people really know how to start projects. They really know how to deal with challenges, how to overcome them, and how to essentially remain a solid and resilient figure. But the thing is, for an early part of their life, they'll really shy away from being assertive. Instead of standing up for themselves or standing up for something they disagree with, they'll rather keep quiet, even though the injustice they've seen will cause them to boil inside. It'll literally cause them to get so angry and infuriated. So essentially, the cautious, limiting energy that Saturn has really restricts the Aryan bold energy that is usually incredibly expressive, that's usually incredibly risk-taking. With Saturn, you can't take risks. You can't just go ahead and do things on a whim, like what Aries would do. So with Saturn and Aries, your ability to be spontaneous, to take risks and those sort of things is limited. So Aries likes to take immediate action, but Saturn likes to plan things over the long term. So this placement causes this inner conflict in an individual where they really want to do something and they really want to act on their desires immediately, but they feel like there's all these limitations in their way. There's all these things stopping them from actually doing what they want to do. However, when the energy of Saturn and Aries is channeled properly, which usually occurs after the first Saturn return, this placement gifts a person the patience and the strategic planning that Saturn gives while being able to maintain courage, enthusiasm, and initiative that Aries brings. A A key area of growth if you have Saturn in Aries revolves around developing patience. Aries tends to drive towards immediate action, which can lead to impulsiveness. But Saturn, with its eye on long-term success and stability, wants you to make calculated moves rather than impulsive leaps. So essentially, the lesson behind Saturn in Aries is balancing passion with discipline. Even if you have the strongest passion, without discipline, that passion will lead you nowhere. And on the other hand, even if you have all the discipline in the world, without a passion, you can't achieve anything. So really difficult, challenging life lessons surrounding patience is what Saturn and Aries individuals will go through. If you have Saturn and Aries, you might find that your impulsiveness and your inability to be patient is what brings you the most difficult experiences in your life. It's what brings you really challenging difficulties you have to manage and get through. They might spend a big portion of their life being so impulsive and impatient that they start projects or they start plans or they initiate things that lead to nothing or don't grow and don't succeed. And then this leads to so much frustration because the Saturn and Aries individual can't figure out why things just won't work out for them. But the reason is because they didn't plan, because they didn't lay the foundations needed for things to succeed. They thought that the idea and the passion and the drive is enough to get there, but it's really not. Individuals with Saturn and Aries are born leaders. And when they really tap into their inner strength, they're super courageous and fearless. Almost like a soldier who's in an army or even in charge of a large army. A Saturn and Aries individual will at some point be pushed into some kind of leadership role in their life, even though they don't want this. And they will become a person that a lot of other people look up to. A lot of other people look to for answers and guidance. And it is at this point that these people need to learn that they cannot tap into their usual coping mechanisms or the usual ways of dealing things, because that will actually lead other people down the wrong path because other people follow in their footsteps. So the most important thing these people need to bear in mind is the moment they step into a leadership position, all eyes are on them. And everything they do influences those around them. So their steps and their actions need to be pure. They need to be motivated towards a good cause. A Saturn and Aries individual can easily lead other people down the wrong path, but they can also lead other people towards great success and accomplishment. If you have Saturn and Aries, you should ask yourself, where do you lead others towards? What direction and what path are you influencing other people to follow based off of your influence and who you are? So when Saturn and Aries individuals were young, they could have turned down many opportunities to lead or help other people because they actually feared responsibility. Although these individuals have so much support from friends and family, their lack of confidence can be what causes them to really shy away from the challenges that can bring them the success they're after. Often these individuals can feel unqualified for what they've been set out to do, and this lack of confidence and this lack of self-esteem in being able to do something prevents them from actually proceeding with it. However, one piece of advice I can give to Saturn and Aries individuals is fake it until you make it. You don't always have to get everything right. You don't always have to be perfect or super qualified, but you can learn during the process and you can eventually become the most qualified person in your field. So like an animal in pursuit of his prey, a Saturn and Aries person must develop the ability to act swiftly, carefully, and confidently. A lack of confidence and a constant tendency to second guess themselves is what really debilitates these individuals early on in their lives. But what happens eventually is they get put into a position where they have to gain confidence, where they have to become strong, which usually occurs around their Saturn return. And when this happens, they realize that any lack of confidence they've experienced, any inner doubts that they've thought about themselves are only thoughts within their mind. And it is merely their own thoughts that are limiting them in life and limiting their success. Thing is, it can take a while before a Saturn in Aries individual matures into the strong leader that they're always destined to be. Saturn is a slow-moving planet, meaning that the leadership abilities that is destined to Saturn in Aries usually only comes later in life. So what happens when a person finally breaks through the restrictions of Saturn and they access the traits of Aries that their Saturn has limited them from? These people will become leaders. They'll become experts and specialists in their field. But at this point, they need to also bear in mind that if they go too far down the Saturn and Aries path, they're going to forget how to follow, and they're only going to want to be a leader. So what I mean by this is, yes, it's great to be a leader, but sometimes in life you have to follow others and you have to team up with other people in order to create cooperation and harmony. So when a Saturn and Aries person becomes too obsessed with leading others, being the boss, being the one in charge, being the one with all the power in their hands, they can sometimes overlook the needs of others. They can sometimes overlook what's required for a harmonious situation or environment to exist. So with this placement, it's super important to not become arrogant in your confidence and in your leadership abilities, and to remain humble. Because, you know, with this placement, it's a tough journey. This person starts their life lacking confidence, lacking the ability to take charge of their life, until eventually around their Saturn return, life brings them so many difficult experiences that they have to take charge, that they have to become more confident. Then, when they've mastered this, they become arrogant because their inner child, their inner wound remembers how much confidence they didn't have, how much they lacked it. So when they actually have it, it overtakes them. It becomes all they ever want. And because they lacked this confidence for so long in their life, they don't want to lose it. They want to exist in this super self-assured state. This deep, desperate want and need to remain in this very self-assured state can be an attempt to cover up the wound of lacking self-confidence for so long throughout their life. So unless they heal that part of them, that younger part of them, that earlier part of them, they can become an incredibly arrogant, selfish leader. So when it comes to a career, if you have Saturn in Aries, you must aim for a career where you can kind of build your way up to becoming a leader. These people excel the most in authoritative leadership roles. Relationships can be very difficult for these individuals, especially at the start of their life, because they can be quite impulsive and their need for independence can create a disconnection between them and their partner. Often these individuals are very attracted to super independent partners who aren't too coochie or attached and who can kind of live a very independent life separate from the Saturn in Aries individual while still being in a relationship. So if you have Saturn in Aries, you'll be put in positions of leadership throughout your life. And the decisions you make in those roles will shape the lessons you learn and the person you become. It's also important to remember that some conflicts are simply just not worth the effort. To what extent do you jump? Do you pause for a moment to gather your thoughts? You have to learn how to trust both your rational mind and your gut instincts. If you know someone who has Saturn in Aries, it's important to support their confidence and their autonomy. If your child has Saturn in Aries, they should be encouraged to lead. Instead of making choices for them, let them decide for themselves. Let them choose their activities. You need to boost their ability to make decisions for themselves. If you have an employee with Saturn in Aries, you need to assign them some kind of leadership role, some kind of role where they're in charge of something, so that they can also build their confidence. So how does the Saturn return in Aries affect the Saturn in Aries individual? The Saturn return is a really important transit that occurs around every 29 or so years, marking the time where Saturn returns to the position it occupied in your natal chart. A Saturn return is associated with maturation and development. A Saturn return in Aries is when you need to define your individuality and your leadership style. It's when your ambitions, your assertiveness, and your actions are put to the test. You're going to be asked to step up, to take charge, and to demonstrate initiative in some area of your life, whether it's in your career, your relationship, in your family, or in your personal projects. So Saturn is all about responsibility, discipline, and hard work, and a Saturn return in Aries means that you need to learn how to temper the fiery, impulsive nature of Aries with the calculated, steady influence of Saturn. So a Saturn return in Aries feels like a push and pull between wanting to charge ahead versus needing to plan and take steps. So the most challenging thing during this period involves struggles with patience, particularly when it comes to achieving long-term goals. There might be times where you feel held back or delayed, which causes a lot of frustration. However, remember that these challenges are here to teach you valuable lessons in strategic action, discipline, and the importance of taking a structured approach towards reaching your goals. This is also a time where you are going to have to assert your independence and your personal authority, even when you face resistance and limitations. At the end of a Saturn return in Aries, you will find yourself emerging as a much more disciplined, responsible, and assertive version of yourself. So this is my video on Saturn in Aries. Please let me know what you thought of this video. Do you have Saturn in Aries and can you relate to what I've said? Do you know someone with Saturn in Aries who's struggling with these type of challenges in their life? Please let me know in the comments. Also, don't forget to check out my Saturn ebook if you'd like to learn more about Saturn. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and also subscribe to my channel if you have not already. I've added the link to my website, my socials, and my Patreon in the description of this video if you'd like to reach out, connect, and support me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.